What's up, everybody? George T from The Wagon. This week, we're doing some really special stuff. We're not at The Wagon, if you notice today. We're somewhere else. We're at Dub Fab right now. We got Jason Dunkle's beam here from the supercharged double cab, and we got Michael Anderson from Dub Fab, and we're gonna get this thing fixed, so hopefully we can start driving that double cab. You guys remember our video we did with Jason Dunkle's double cab that we built? We changed everything on that thing except for the front beam. So right now what we got is, I donated the beam and the trailing arms here. Russ at Old Speed hooked them up with the spindles, and Michael at Dub Fab did a full rebuild on this sucker for him. We're gonna focus on one item today as a group that we're gonna do a little tutorial for you guys, and that's doing your bus center pin. This is probably the most important part in your steering, that's the most overlooked. So what we're focusing on today is the bus center pin. This is a crucial part of your steering, and most people have blown out center pins, and that's where the majority of their play is coming from in their steering. They'll go and change tie rods and fix everything else on the front end and leave that part alone, and it's unfortunately the source of a lot of their woes. So right now today we're going to be installing the 211-498-171 Wolfsburg West, and this is the Febi kit, Philstein. It's a good comprehensive kit. It comes with a new center pin made in Germany. It comes with your two bushings, upper and lower, your pinch bolt, your wave washer for tension, your spacer, your two seals, and your cap, and also the lock tab for the pitman arm bolt that goes in there. Mike has generously donated a beautifully powder-coated pitman arm for this. And he has here a couple of specialty tools that he made. This is how he's gonna get the bushings back into the beam, and he made these here. They're basically just drifts for it. At my shop, I put them in with a socket and a C-clamp, so I wanted to show you this example of how you can do it there. But here's all the basic tools we're gonna need. A 19mm is basically for your pinch bolt, and a ream. This is the most important part. After these bushings are pressed in, you do have to ream them afterwards. Otherwise, they're too small. You can see these do not fit into that bushing without a ream. This is the part that most people do not have. And I purchased mine from a shop in Vegas called Hannah Tools. It's not difficult to come by, but they are fairly pricey. If you're doing it one time, you're better off taking it to a shop to get it done as opposed to buying the tool. So we're gonna get started on this. We have all of our tools laid out, and a hammer. You can never go wrong with a big old hammer. We're gonna get started on this, and we're gonna do a step-by-step tutorial, and I'm gonna introduce you to Mike from Dub Fab here. This is my homeboy, my man over here. If you know anything about VW bus suspension, you know there's two gurus that I consider my business. We got Nate over at Wagons West and Michael Anderson from Dub Fab, and I'm proud to call this man my friend. Michael Anderson, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. It's cold. It's a great winter morning, and we're going to come together here and put this center pin kit in this beam for Jason. Appreciate the opportunity to do this. Dub Fab, Michael Anderson. I've been doing Volkswagen bus suspension for 20 years, probably almost 10 years professionally. I'm real particular and picky about every single thing that I do. It doesn't leave my shop unless it is exactly right. Things take a long time to get done, but I love the precision and the exactness of how I do everything, and we're going to show you right now how we get this done.
If you're doing this in your bus, there's a couple things you're going to have to do before you actually jump into this. Number one being, you're going to have to take your shift rod out of the front of the bus because it lays on top of the pitman arm. You will not have room to get it out of there. After you remove your front shift rod, you're basically going to remove that 19mm right here, and as soon as you get this out, then the whole setup is going to come apart. Your pin will come out, and then pitman arm will come out of the way. You can leave your tie rods connected here if you want and just push it back, but you will have to remove the steering damper 100%. Otherwise, it will not move far back enough. I always find it easy, but I have a tie rod popper to just pop everything off and get this sucker out of the way. You do what's easy for you. Even after you remove your pin and everything, there's still going to be two bushings in there that need to be removed. I also suggest at that point you're going to remove that Zerk fitting there as well. It'll make it easier to push the bushings in and out.
You've got to get both the bushings out of here, and you don't have the way to bring them down from the top. If this is inside of a bus, you can't get them from the top and strike it. So you've got to come in from the bottom, and the goal here is that you're going to push these through so that both of them come out the top, and that's why this is built the length that it is, so it can go all the way through. And let's have it. Yeah, get it. doing this. That's one. That's two.
What you're looking at here in that bushing, you see that U in it? So that is purposely done like that. This is the channel that grease is going to go in for the pin. So at the bottom, that U goes all the way to the edges, as you see right there. So your bottom one will have the U facing this way, and the top, the U will be an A. We're going to do, there's two methods of doing this. Michael has his way with the drift, but a lot of people won't have that drift made. I don't even have that drift made. So this is the way that I do it at my shop, is I press them in as such. I have a slightly larger version of this, and this is what I'm using when I do it. So we basically get it set up the way you want it. Right now this thing is in its A formation. Remember I was telling you there's a U in there. You make sure it's pointing upward on that dude. And so what I do is I'm bringing this guy in there, and all I do is start tightening this down. And you can pick up these clamps.
Yeah, check it out, it's already going.
Yeah, you can pick these clamps up at any welding or fabrication shop. Harbor Freight has a version of them, and I'm sure they're a lot cheaper than that welding shop would be. But this is it. That's all I do to put those on myself. I've always done these in the car. This is the first time I've ever had a beam actually this accessible. This is wonderful. We don't have this. Usually you're working inside of a car. This will fit inside your bus. There's nothing in the way, and that flat bill is what makes this possible. So we're gonna get this top one put in all the way. I usually have a little cheater bar on mine, like a little tube. There you go, look at you. We're going old school, guys. Uh-oh. Hey now,
here,
look at this. Teamwork makes the dream work, guys. Oh, I'm coming back on that. Yeah, back that up. Make sure when you're doing this, you're clamping straight onto that dude. I got a little overzealous when I got my bite on it.
About right there.
Boom.
Yeah, it started to walk a little bit. Yeah, now it's just walking right in. Straight shot.
That was my bad. Make sure that when you're clamping it nice and square and straight. I was trying to push it in crooked, and that's going to be nothing but problems. Michael, do you leave it up a little bit on top?
Yeah, so you have to leave the thickness of this washer. This is a spring washer that's just about over 1 millimeter thick, and you need to leave that bushing sticking out the height of a flat washer, about 1 millimeter up.
Okay.
What I've noticed too, that if you leave it a little bit tall, when you go compress the whole thing together to put the pitman iron on, it'll take up the difference if it's too tall.
I was barely moving it.
That looks good. You can just go slap that over the center of it.
Beautiful. Even when I'm doing this at my shop, I usually drive this one in, like I said, with a socket. You can use the clamp method again, but the problem is if you grab the top of that and you press that flush, you're gonna have trouble. You gotta get that sucker back up again. So this bottom one we're gonna tap in. This will be more realistic to the way that you're gonna be doing it at home. Remember, now my V is facing downward. The arrow is pointing downward, and my slots are going to be in the middle where the source of grease is. Michael, is there any preference to the way it's faced?
I'll rotate them 180 from each other.
Okay, so if that one's on this side, I should put my V on that side, huh? Okay, so we're going to put that dude, first get it in space. Oh, you got a drift.
Yeah.
See, I'm not used to this fanciness, dude. Look at this, dude. You put it on there, it actually holds it for you and everything. Fancy. And this one, you're going to drive in flush. How flush are you usually getting that, Mike?
Just right on it. Again, it'll make up the difference when you go press it together.
Okay. Boom.
Done.
So that's nice and flush. Arrow pointing up, arrow pointing down in your bushings. Make sure you have it set up that way. At this point, if you want to, you could put your zerk fitting in. We're going to make that the last step because this all needs to be reamed. The new center pin does not fit in this. That's why a reamer is required in this. You see that won't drop in? What size is that reamer, Michael?
I believe it's 24 millimeter. Let's take a look. This is right on it. Yep, 24 millimeter.
Do you have a mic that we can mic this with?
Yeah, and you'll find that that sometimes is 0.2 under.
So this is the 24 millimeter reamer. The reamer I use at my shop is an adjustable reamer, meaning you can make it bigger or smaller as you go. And what I usually do is I mic this, and I try to get within 1/1000 of this is usually what I'm doing. But let's see what we're at. 24, actually 23.98. So that 24 millimeter will be perfect for that. A little bit of, just a slight amount of play in it.
Yep.
See, when you do this for a living every day, you got the right tool for the job.
Get it?
Is this tapered?
Yes.
Okay, so that makes sense. But you drive it the whole way through?
Yep, and I drive it all the way through, and I'll stop short when this one is in the middle. I won't push it all the way through.
Okay.
I will oftentimes try to under-ream this one, like don't take it all the way through, test the pin, and in my mind, it's perfect when you put the arm on and you can barely swing it. If it can move under its own weight, it's too loose.
Okay. This has a very slight taper to it, so it does actually index into the bushing right now, which is nice because that helps you center it. If it was 24 the entire way, you'd have a little bit of trouble getting that dude in there. Right now I feel resistance, so this is when you're doing it. When you're using a reamer, smooth motions as best as possible. You don't want to do herky-jerky stuff. You want to keep it moving. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, and you only ever want to spin it the one direction, the cutting direction.
Never go back and forth with it. It's always just nice and smooth. Actually, Michael, you want to do that one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Since it's your tool and you're used to your little fanciness here.
Yeah, you're going to be doing this under your bus.
Yeah.
And it hits the other bushing, keeps it aligned.
Nice and smooth.
Yep. And I will stop short, about right here. And I don't spin it pulling it out because it keeps cutting, so just drop it straight out.
And if it does any cutting when you're doing that, it's just going to be a slit as opposed to rounding out the entire thing again.
See that amount of pressure that's taken me to put this in?
Yes, sir.
That's what I like. So I didn't run it all the way through. I want that much tension, right? So right now you can't spin it by hand. It's a little bit snug. Catch this real quick.
Now he's putting a little bit of lube on the dude.
I'll show you how and why I like it a little bit snug, right? A little bit of grease on it, it'll go in a little bit better. And I'm lining this up straight across the front, and I'll show you why in a second here. Okay, that took some pressure to put in. If it falls out, it's too loose.
Yeah. So it should be able to support its own weight when the pin's in there.
Yes, so that you want it that snug. If there's any kind of gap in this at all, this ought to be like, if possible, a zero tolerance, not really, but as close as you can get it. If there's any gap in there at all, it turns into slop in the steering.
Correct.
So I'm just gonna line this up and test fit it, and then I'm gonna show you the movement and how much pressure it takes to turn this thing. We got a 19 kicking around here. Watch, and this is gonna come back apart in a second, but this is just to hold it, right? It won't slide under its own weight. You have to put some pressure on it. Watch, feel that.
It has just like a slight drag, a little bit of resistance to it, but won't, like you see I'm hitting it, it's not just flopping around. This is crucial. This is absolutely crucial because a little bit of play here equates to a lot of play out there and on your steering wheel. So that's actually a nice touch. That's probably a little tighter than I normally get them. That's really nice.
So what I have found, if you have to put a real amount of pressure on this, you'll get memory steering, where you turn the steering wheel and it doesn't clock back. This is the same tightness that I do with kingpins in the spindles.
Okay.
If you can barely turn it by hand, you're good. If it sits there and flops around loose, then it's too loose, and all of those points turn into slop in the steering. So this is right where I like it.
Perfect. Let's talk about this actual particular part here. You got a lot of experience with these before, and there's other ones on the market. Is this your preferred vendor right here? Your preferred
the Febi or Febi kit is the single best kit out there. I haven't seen any other kits by any other manufacturers that are to this level. There's a consistency in their quality control and the diameter of this center pin kit that I can know every single time how deep to ream that thing and not have to second guess it. And they include every single part that needs to come with it. I bought other kits before that are missing some of the seals or some of the spring washer or the flat washer, and you don't want to have to reuse old parts because they're worn out. So this is probably the single best kit on the market.
So when you're ordering your kit, make sure you're trying to get a Febi. Bilstein is what they go off of also. And I know this particular one came from Wolfsburg West. There are other distributors out there that do sell them. I happen to be a fan of Wolfsburg West. Maybe they could sponsor the channel one day, huh? Maybe.
Let's get it.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the order of how things go in there, because there's a lot of parts and pieces here. I have books, and I use them a lot. I have the actual VW Type 2 manual, and it shows you a breakdown of how these parts and pieces go in there. So as the pin goes in, everything's going to be coming from up under the bottom into the beam. Your very first piece to go onto this pin is going to be basically just your spacer. And all that's doing is making sure that as this is in there, it has something to ride up against. This is the same thing as you use a shim in a rocker assembly. Same thing. That's basically just giving you an area for this flat surface to ride up against when it's actually under tension of being compressed. Once we get over to the top of it, This piece goes on first.
Yep.
This white piece is basically like a seal that goes on here.
Let me show you a trick.
All right, this is why we're at Michael Anderson's shop. Let's do it.
This is that G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip. So you can warm these up. Yep. Don't microwave it. Don't do that. But
no.
I'll stretch it just a little bit.
Look at that.
Pop it right over.
When you do it every day. When you do it every day. The more you know, huh? So that is going to be your part that goes onto the beam. This is basically the seal once you start greasing it to keep from squirting out of every direction in there. We'll do a quick walkthrough showing you how everything goes onto here. So we have our spacer on the pin, the very first one. This is the flat washer. There's two washers that come with the kit, the flat and that wave. The wave is what's keeping tension. It's going to be your upper, and that flat one's your lower. This piece is going to come up from underneath here with that nice resistance. That feels so good. You guys have no idea. That's a very satisfying push on that dude. This is going to be our next piece that goes on there. And this, if you remember, we left this bushing sticking out about 1 millimeter up this way, and this is why. Because this spring washer goes around the bushing, not on top of it, around it. All right, next would be our cap. And that basically is going to hold everything. What about the washer that goes on the top of this?
Yep, O-ring washer.
Oh, because it indexes. All right,
Yep.
See, another thing.
Keeps the grease
It's been a minute since I've done this. Your
pitman arm has a step cut in the bottom of it to receive that O-ring washer.
this goes into that groove. And these are important things, you know, because you want the grease to stay here, not out here. You know, I know every beam you look at underneath the car is like an archaeological dig. If these seals are in place, it won't look like an archaeological dig. So this piece would go on top. Is there a trick to this one, Michael? Or just push it over?
Down.
Boom. Get that in there.
And then
Your next order of business, like you see that indentation there in the pin? This is crucial, and I see this just when I take people's beams apart. I see that it was forced in usually when someone's doing it, because what it'll do, it absolutely destroys the threads, because your bolt is going to go through that and then come in on the other side. And if you have something in the way, get in on that dunk, you can see how that goes into the cutout. And if this is not lined up perfectly, you absolutely roach these threads. And then most people just keep going after they've roached the threads, and now they roach the threads in this. So try and make sure that you can see line of sight right through it. It's not in any way in the way. So our bolt's going to go to the back side. We have our groove in the back side. We're bringing that dude in from back here. If you remember, that was a little bit difficult to put on there. So we're going to make sure it stays on. All right. So now, you can't just go put it in there. This is going to have to go under compression. Like we're going to have to press all this together.
it's off by about 1/8 of an inch right now from lining up, so you got to squeeze it together.
So it won't work the way it goes. So now Michael's going to show us his trick for compressing everything together to get this bolt in there.
And I propose we'd add one more step to this. We're going to blow this back apart real quick and grease every little component in there. I like to do that so that nothing's dry when it goes together, because you'll go to pump grease into this thing, and it won't necessarily get between the flat washer or all around the spring washer or up in the cup or up against this O-ring here. So we're just going to put a tiny little bit of grease on everything real quick, and then we'll slap it back together real quick, and then we'll compress this.
Let's blow it apart real quick and get some grease on it. So we got a little dollop of grease right there, and we're using a Q-tip just to be able to apply it. And what we're going to do is we're going to start applying it on every piece here. So we know that needs to be lubricated. So I'm going to put a little bit on there. Michael, do you actually run it the whole way up it?
Yeah, and there's still a little bit of grease on it before we from test fitting it.
Yeah, from our last one.
Yeah, you never want to dry fit any of these components for your final assembly.
We're going to good amount on there. So should I start putting it back in and we lubricate things as we're putting it back on?
You'll throw this flat washer over it. You can probably grease the side of that.
Yep. So once we put that on, now let's put some grease on the other side of this here, because this is what actually rides up against your beam. And when we get done, hopefully this is the only grease we see on the exterior of this, or pretty darn close to it.
Yep.
Should we put some inside on the bushings first too? Is it not a bad idea?
We can certainly do that too. Yeah.
Why not? Let's get crazy with it, guys. Let's run with scissors. Anybody who watches the videos knows that just as Michael is, I'm pretty particular about the way I do things as well.
Yep.
Cleanliness is next to godliness, man. Now we're going to go and put that in there. If you guys knew how satisfying this feels to push in there.
That it's snug. Yep.
She's snug. Thank you, sir. I'm going to take a little bit of that grease off the top, and we're going to use this elsewhere. We're going to put it here, where we know that other flat bushing is going to come up on it, and also put some around all this. Once again, you see our little divot here? I like to bring it to the front. Oh, wow. There you go. You need that monkey grip strength he's got, bro. I ain't got that monkey grip strength. Got a little fresh grease on that. Do you lube up both sides of this dude here?
Yep. And then I'll also stick some on the inside of this pocket because this part here is going to ride up against this white seal.
Perfect.
This nylon seal.
And when we're putting this on there, we're putting thin layers. This shouldn't look like you're packing bearings here. Just make sure you have some on all of your surfaces that are going together. Beautiful. And then he's referring to this thing is dished. It's got an inside and outside. So we're going to put some on the inside where it's going to be riding on that outer seal to make sure it still spins freely with everything. So smooth.
Just like that.
Next on is our seal.
So this is a perfect time to talk about this. If you have an early model beam, 50s style,
Yep.
you won't be using some of these components. The larger seal on the bottom, there isn't room for that. If you have this center pocket here with the uprights that go in between the beam, you have the early style one. So it won't take some of these components. So what you'll do is just take note that when you blow it apart, what's on there, and you'll use those, because the early pitman arms also don't have the cutout, they don't have the step in them, and they don't have the hole in the center. They have the bracket where it kicks off to the side.
Yeah.
That one won't have the step, so you won't end up using this nylon O-ring.
What is the cutoff here on that? Do you happen to remember?
I want to say it's like 61, but I've seen different beams in different years. I don't rely on years anymore. It could be anything. This
Early and late. So early will not take the large white, the cup, or the small white. It basically just has the wave washer on there and it gets smashed onto that. That's it. So this one obviously will leak when you go to grease it. Technically it shouldn't because it's a U, but you know, grease finds its way. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna put our center arm on and we're gonna show the process of pressing it to where we get that bolt hole lined up and goes in there. Michael's gonna walk us through the process of pressing this guy together so where we get that lined up. So one thing that he has is like a specialty tool that I really like. Actually, I might have I might have to steal this from him because I really like it. You see how the foot's off of that guy? On the top of this pin here is a small little index. So that literally just centers itself right into the center pin. This is a great little tool. These are cheap enough to where you can buy them at friggin' Harbor Freight and knock that dude off there and you got your own tool just like it. So let's see how we go about doing this right now, Michael.
So if you take a look at this, zoom in on here for a second. This is low, it's not centered in the space because you've got a spring washer in here that's got to collapse. And so we're gonna put the pitman arm on it. We need to line up the rotation in such a way that it's square with this, right? We can't have it all the way over here, it won't line up. So we're near where it needs to go. You can use a socket or any other spacer to take up this gap. This pin is going to stick up about 1/8 of an inch through the top of this, so you can't just clamp right onto it. You'll get stopped from getting it deep enough. So we've got a pocket, just anything, a socket, anything that can do that. I caught it good times. We're gonna sit here and collapse it. So we're riding right in the center of this thing. What'll happen is you'll find that as we suck this thing down, if you're not dead aligned with this, you can rotate them separately. You can rotate the pitman arm separate from the pin to get it lined up square. And you're gonna tighten this thing up. And if you can see, if you can watch this thing compress, weird, about dead nuts, clear shot straight through this right now. And so the easiest way to do that is this pitman arm has already been cleaned up, but this should be tapped. It's 12 by 1.50. If you haven't ever cleaned up these threads, they're usually a little bit chunky. If you're gonna reuse, the original bolts have a longer shoulder on them. These come with the Febi kit. I like them. These pieces are fresh. We're gonna get the lock tab in here. This thing never cooperates. It wants to spin on you. And so the long side goes across the front and the short side goes vertical. And it goes together like this, right? And so I'll like to test fit this thing. Because all my parts are cleaned up, I can thread this by hand all the way to the bottom. And that's where we're at.
You see, he didn't have to force that. That's super important, like I talked about earlier. If you roll those threads, you've jacked up two pieces, your hardware and your pitman arm. So with the way that Michael lined it up, he literally put it in by hand. There was no tool involved in here. He didn't break out a wrench. It goes the whole way in, and that's very important, guys. Never force. It should always go smooth as silk. So with this, it's compressed. This has the proper tension on it, set on by the spring that they supply you, and this is ready to roll, correct?
It's ready to rock, so we're gonna tap over the forward tab, and I'm gonna move this out of the way just a touch. And again, this never wants to cooperate because this thing will run a roll on you when you go to tighten it down. So we're flat up against it. That's all it's gotta be. And again, this needs to be out of the way so this has a clear shot. You can run through it. Again, it's already starting to roll on me. And let's see if we can get that to stay put a little better.
That's a good little tip that I didn't know about.
Yeah, see, it's starting to roll again.
Yeah, they're horrible.
I'm going to cheat it. Let's see what other tools I got.
All right, Michael set us up with a little cheater here.
Just another...
Just set of cowboys.
What is this, 6R? 7R? I'm not sure. Clamp that tab. That tab wants to roll up. Don't let it.
That way it can't roll up on you when you're going to tighten it up and ruin your placement.
And wrench down.
You just get that dude snug, or you torque it down.
Just plenty snug. You don't want it sliding separate in the pin, so there is a little bit of gap that if that were loose, the pin would sit there and flop back and forth in the arm. You don't want it loose at all. So I just wrench it down and then we beat the top locking pin over. We're done with all the clamps at this point. This is how it's going to look. You can see how that sticks up just a little bit, why we had that spacer in there with the clamp. And then you're not going to get crazy with it. You're just tapping this thing over. And it locks it from back and back out on its own. That's all you need. Nothing fancy. Get that a little bit more.
So now this is under tension, guys, and it is smooth as silk. I mean, that is really nice. It just flows so well. Last step, we still got a couple more steps here. We got to put that Zerk fitting in, and we are going to inject some grease in this dude. Don't forget that part, otherwise everything it is for naught. Because as soon as you have this thing dry, that brass bushing bronze bushing gets eaten up real fast. So we're going to put our Zerk in and get some grease in this dude. And Mike likes to use a blue Loctite on his Zerk fittings.
Just as a sealant, not to keep it from backing out.
You're saying so when you go to inject it's not squirting on the
so what I'll do is I'll let that dry because I have, these are snug, right? Yeah. I have gone to pump grease in these before that my, tight fit in here is so much so that after I fill up the grease pockets in the bushings, it'll start pumping grease out of the thread. If you need to clean up this Zerk thread at all, it is 6mm by 1.0 thread. So you let that dry for a bit, pump it full of grease, ready to rock, and you can see how much tension this takes to push this. It's not just flopping around on its own.
That's wonderful.
This is really fantastic.
So I'm going to I might have to buy a 24mm ream, now, like an independent one.
I don't know if he still can go around, but I'm going to give him a pump anyways. I bought this from Jogger, J-O-G-R, maybe 10, 15 years ago. It is, if you don't know if you can read this, it's a 24mm H7 high-speed steel hand reamer, and this thing's about 8 inches in length or so. I've never worn it out. I've done hundreds of front ends with these, and it works great. Awesome.
We're going to talk about a couple of reasons why we're doing this beam. We're going to bring Dunkle back into the mix here. The main reason that we're even doing this, you guys have seen the supercharger video in the double cab, and that thing is an absolute crap show. I'm going to put a little clip right here. You're going to see where I almost hit Dunkle while we're on the test drive, and it wasn't a joke. I wasn't trying to be funny. The thing is impossible to drive. When we took it over to the alignment shop, he's got 6 degrees of positive caster on the beam, so it is almost undrivable. So this is our solution. We're making a whole new beam for this dude. So Dunkle, come on in. You guys remember Dunkle from the videos. He's one of the besties. He hangs out at the shop. We do a lot of work on his Volkswagens along with mine. So you've driven your double cab.
Yeah. Well,
how is it?
It's horrible. Like over 35 miles per hour. If you change a lane, it feels like the whole bus is going to roll over.
It's insane. I've never driven a car so squirrely in my life as far as that goes.
So we did a tape measure alignment and brought it to the alignment shop, and the alignment was perfect. It was just the caster was really, really bad. And in that double cab, the only things that we didn't we changed out every single component in that double cab. The only thing we didn't mess with was the front beam.
Literally every part. So from front to back is brand new on the thing, except for this guy right here. And now, thanks to Michael Anderson over here, Russell at Old Speed, the wagon, this dude right here, we got Dunkle pretty much a brand new beam end to end. So I am really hoping, fingers crossed, that we put this dude in there and we can actually start doing some test runs on that thing, because that's one of my highest viewed videos is his supercharger video, and we have no seat time with it because the thing is a death trap to drive right now. Actually, white knuckle terrifying to drive. And I'm a pretty bold dude. I'll drive some pretty S-bag stuff, but I tell you what, man, I think twice before I go over 45 miles an hour in that double cab. So we put that thing together because we want to test drive it. We want to see that thing over at Bus by the Bridge. We want to drive that thing and go distance with it and see how that supercharger kit does on it, because for $2,800, is that what it was? 2,800 bucks?
Yeah.
Let's say $3,000. Yeah. For $3,000 is the most bang for buck that you could ever ask for in a car.
It like doubles your horsepower on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing's nutty to drive right now. It has great acceleration and everything like that, but it's absolutely uncontrollable. So one of our follow-up videos to this is going to be putting this into Jason's double cab.
Let's talk about this front end real quick. This is a model year, every piece about it is a model year 66/67 front end, and this was the peak link pin, kingpin front end suspension from Volkswagen. So what it has, let's start with the control arms. It has bushings on the inside and needle bearings on the outside, and we did go ahead and pull out the Micarta factory bushings and replace them with the white Delrin bushings that are of our own make. Dunkle went ahead and bought brand new needle bearings from Wolfsburg West. We popped those in. The leaf packs are brand new leaf packs from CB Performance is where we get them all. They come from Brazil. As often as possible, I do not reuse original leaf packs. It might be a cheap option just to cut them up and reuse them for whatever, narrow beam, stock beam, whatever, but they all have sag built into them. When you pull them out, you can see a twist from 60 to 70 years of use, and we replace them nearly every single time. I try to find a reason to force people to replace them. They're $200 plus or minus. Being the best performing factory front end, 66 to 67 front year, it has the larger 22 millimeter link pins, and it's the only front end in a split window bus that has the sway bar option, and this makes a huge difference when you're driving that bus around. So this right here,
with his being at stock height, because you're going to get that body roll at stock height. Actually, I'd say almost a little lifted with the bigger tires he has.
And so in any bus, any year from, let's say, post barn door 55 to 67, if you're looking for slight performance gains out of your front suspension, go find you a stock 66 to 67 front end, and you'll know it by the sway bar on the front of it. And this is my favorite front end for buses, for split buses.
Well, I'm glad Dunkle's getting this. I'm hoping that we put this dude in and we got a double cab, start driving around.
Yeah.
Have some fun with it.
Get it.
Man, people got a long, big, loud exhaust around here.
Welcome to Utah.
Yeah. So Michael's got that 15 when it's in my shop right now. That's freaking hammered to the ground and absolutely beautiful. So I'm doing a little bit of work on Michael's, and you're going to see my bus come over here to get some work done on by Michael over here. So you're going to see some additional collabs in the future. Am I correct about that, Michael?
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I enjoy this.
We're going to show you guys, we're going to crack the code on doing a steering box rebuild. And I'm going to show you the way Michael does it. Most people won't be able to do it at home the way Michael does it because he's that crazy and nutty about it. But I showed you a way that I do the steering box raise in my videos where I cut columns and cut shafts and lower them all. Michael does it a completely different way, which I'm really stoked to show you guys that in the future. We're also going to be installing a steering box raise on my bus and potentially doing a beam swap. We talked about it. We may be doing a beam swap in the future of mine. I got a beautiful Wagons West beam, but it's also a bushing beam. And this guy here makes quad bearing beams that I really want to get my hands on because I'm all about ride. I like the ride of a car. We're going to do a lot more collabs in the future with Dub Fab. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you guys next week.